Hi guys, Rob from Rob's Model Cars, and today's tutorial video I'm going to show you how I lay carbon fibre decal on my model car parts. Now I've got a couple of parts here that I need to apply carbon fibre decal to. These are from the Liberty Walk Audi R8, and these are the side blade panels. I'm going to show you, these are pretty easy panels to do. They have a little bit of a shape to them, but nothing too extreme. So I'm going to show you how I apply, or the method to do templates and to apply carbon fibre decal to these two panels here. I've also got a rear diffuser from the same model. This isn't too difficult either, and I'll show you how I template and lay the carbon fibre in a couple of pieces on this rear diffuser. And then I'm going to show you something a bit harder. This is a rear engine surround from a Hot Wheels Elite Ferrari 458, and I've done quite a few of these in the past, and most people have been really surprised at how I did that, being that these have quite a lot of different shapes, indentations, the little louvers. So I'm going to show you how to do a more complex piece like this in carbon fibre decal. Now there's plenty of different manufacturers that use, or that make carbon fibre decal, and I've tried a few. I tried a few cheap ones on eBay, and they're just rubbish. So what I've been using for the last year or so is from Interdecal, and they do them in different sheets, but they also do these really large sheets as well, and I find I can get a lot of pieces out of one of these sheets. So you can go on to their website, www.interdecal.com. There's another good manufacturer, which is Scale Motorsport. They do really good decals as well, and they do Kevlar, carbon fibre, clear, which just has a weave pattern which you can put over a colour. I'm going to use some of their decals on another project, but I'll let you know when we tackle that one. So today I'm going to be using the decal sheet from Interdecal, or Interdecal, however you want to pronounce it. And there's a few different setting solutions you can use as well. So most people know of Micro Set or Micro Sol. It's made by Micro Scale. I've got a full bottle here. I haven't actually tried this yet because I'm just using my other brand until that runs out, and then I'll give this a go. But most people know about that one. I've been using for the last 2 years this Solver set, which is made by Walthers, and I've had great success with this product. It's very compatible with the Interdecal carbon fibre decal. There hasn't been a problem with it, and it's really helped conform to these difficult pieces as well. So I'll be using this one today, but there's another one also which is made by Interdecal, which is the same company that makes the decal sheets. And that comes in a little bottle, which is available on their website as well. So I've got a few to choose from there, but today I'm going to be using the Walthers Solver set. This comes in a really big bottle, and it actually has the brush on the lid as well, which I find really, really convenient. So happy with this one, so we're going to go with this one today. Now what we need to do is to make a template for these pieces. So I'm using some masking tape. I always use masking tape that's wider than the part, and I trim it down. Now this is a low tack masking tape, so it's not really sticky, so it's not going to lift the paint off. I have actually painted these pieces just with a spray can with some Tamiya semi-gloss black. I use either semi-gloss or gloss. Most of the time I use a semi-gloss just because it has a little bit of a sheen, and it enables you to slide the decal around on the part. If you use a matte finish paint, it's a lot harder. The decal tends to grab, and it's a lot harder to move it. So what I do with the low tack, I don't want to pull this in certain directions. I just let this stick on in the direction it wants to go, i.e. the flow of the masking tape, because the decal is basically rigid. It is flexible when you add setting solution to it, but you want this basically just to follow the part. So I'm just using my finger and I'm rubbing it on the part, on the direction not trying to force the masking tape in one way. And then I can flip it over and I can trim the masking tape to the outside shape of the part. Now you do want a little bit of overhang on the decal to wrap around, but I just trim it to the shape of the part. And then you'll see in a minute I'll use the masking tape and actually stick the masking tape onto the decal paper. Okay, so just trimming the masking tape with my X-Acto knife just close to the edge of the part. I'll just do the other one while we're at it here so I can cut them both out at the same time. So as I say, just stick it on. There's plenty of overhang on this size masking tape. Let the masking tape follow the part. Obviously, if you're doing a large part, it helps to have a big wide piece of tape, but we can only get masking tape here in a 2-inch width, so sometimes you've got to do a join, which is not a big deal. And it helps to have a very sharp blade in your X-Acto knife as well. Helps to trim the tape easier without it ripping the edges. And that's it. So that's the two parts with a masking tape coating on there. Now another thing you want to do, you want to be aware of the orientation, how this part sits in the car. With this side blade of the Audi, the bottom edge is pretty much flat, so you can mark the horizontal direction on your template, and then I'll want to do the carbon fibre at like a 45-degree angle. But you can sort of set the angle of the weave however you want on the part. Just helps most of the time. If you're not doing multiple parts, you'll know how that goes. And then we can transfer those parts onto the decal sheet. So just carefully peel the masking tape off from one corner. And then line that up on the decal sheet how you want the carbon fibre pattern. So as I say, that on the carbon fibre pattern, that is running at a 45-degree angle here, so I'm just keeping the bottom of these panels parallel with the sheet. That way I know that the carbon fibre is going to be on both pieces the direction that I want it to. Just pull that template off there, and then we can line this one up as well. Now obviously if you have smaller pieces to do, you can use the little spaces in between. I try not to waste as much of this as possible, and you can see there that works out. With those two pieces on there, when they're on the car, the pattern will be going roughly 45 degrees, which is how I want. Now I'll just use a pair of scissors. Now what I want to do, when I trim these out, because I trim these masking tape pieces to the edge of the piece, I want to just allow another 1 or 2 millimeters of carbon fibre pattern around the edge, just so it can wrap around the edge. So when the pieces sit in the body, the pattern doesn't stop, it returns around the edge. You'll see what I mean when we get to apply that. So that's the easiest way to make templates, so that you're not just cutting out a roughly sized piece and then wasting extra amounts. I find it very easy to do the template idea like so. So that's one piece. Now the reason why I paint parts black before I apply carbon fibre is so that if you don't quite get some coverage on the edge of a part, the black painted colour underneath will hide that once the carbon fibre decaled part is clear coated. It'll be less obvious So that's the pieces. So that'll be the piece for that side, and that will be the piece for that side. So that one I'm just going to trim that corner off as well. And that's the two pieces. So at that stage you don't need the masking tape anymore, so unless I've got multiple pieces, and then I'll actually write what part is on there and then do each part at a time so I don't get confused. But that's basically those two pieces, so that will be ready to go. And we'll get to those in a minute. Now, it's exactly the same procedure with this rear diffuser. So what I will do is I'll just stick some masking tape on the inside of the part, make sure it's following the fins, and then again I'll just trim it. Now it's a little bit harder with a 3D part like that, that's why it helps to have a sharp blade, and that way I can just pierce the masking tape and basically follow the edge of the part all the way around. Just be careful when you're using a sharp knife that you don't stab yourself. Sometimes it's not going to easily follow, you're going to get some tears in the tape, but at least you have a pretty good idea of the shape of the part. We're nearly there. And obviously the more complex these parts are, the more of these little templates you have to do, and you have to lay it up in several pieces. Like the Liberty Walk Hurricane Spiders I just built, those rear diffusers actually required about 7 separate pieces. So yeah, that's basically it. Just trim that last little piece off. And then that side, because this is going to be multiple pieces, I'll just put an R on that for right. And then I'll do the same thing with the other side. I'll do another template for that side. And then because you do see the outside edge of this diffuser, I will do a little template which will go around the side and over the top there. And I'll do that left and right as well. And I'll probably do another little piece in the center here. So just a carbon fiber, this diffuser, top and bottom, will actually require 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. And just best to do all those templates at the same time. Lay all these pieces out on your carbon fiber decal sheet the same way, so that when you apply them, the direction of the carbon will be running the same way. So I'll just go ahead and I'll finish doing the templates for these, and then I'll rejoin you. Okay, so I've done the 5 template pieces with the same method I showed you before, and then I've stuck them all onto the sheet. So I've got my left and right side, my center section, which will do the bottom, and then I want to do these side pieces, which are these skinny little pieces. So they're basically ready to trim out the same as I did the other ones. Again, I'll leave about 1 millimeter around the outside of all these cutted out pieces, and then that way it will allow to just slightly overlap around the edge, so that when you do both sides you'll have somewhat of a tiny overlap between the pieces, and that way it'll make it look like the whole piece is carbon fibered. This piece was already cast in black resin, so no need to paint that one. I'll stick the carbon fiber straight on that. Now for these more complex pieces like this, basically the same rule applies. We'll use a large part of masking tape. We're not going to completely stick it to the shape because it is a 3-dimensional shape, and then this I'll just basically roughly cut out with my knife, and leaving quite a bit of overhang on this piece because it is going to conform to that shape, and it is going to somewhat reduce in size. That piece I can cut with the scissors. So you can see I'm leaving that piece quite a fair bit oversized, a good 5 plus millimeters, and I will basically I'll actually do that with a pen. I want a square edge where it meets the front here, so I'll just mark a little line on there, and I'll cut that with the scissors as well. because this has a square edge at the front. It just gives me a little bit to work to. I'm not necessarily going to lay it right on that edge, but it just gives me a starting point. So that is the large oversized piece that I'm going to start with. And again, I'm just going to transfer that onto the carbon fibre piece. I'll try and maximize my carbon fibre. It's not as critical with this piece. It's still going to have a 45-degree angle. And then, yeah, we can just cut that out as well. Even leaving it a little bit bigger than what that is. So that will be for the engine bay, for that piece there. We'll put that to the side, and then I'll cut these pieces out. I'll do those later because it'll be applying exactly the same way as I show you with these small pieces. So let's make a start. Obviously you'll need your little dish of water. Just follow the decal manufacturers. Usually just a lukewarm water is all you need, and depending on the manufacturer, soak the decal in that water for 10 to 20 seconds. It just depends on the brand. Every manufacturer of decals has a different time. I find Hobby Design's decals only take 7 or 8 seconds in the warm water, and they'll come straight off. So you'll be able to tell when it starts loosening up. See, that's into decal, works really quick. You don't leave it soak in the water too long, as otherwise it'll start to dilute the glue that's on the back. And then I'll basically just put my finger on the bottom, and then I'll slide the backing paper out from underneath. Now just make sure that your part is clean. There's no lumps or bumps in it from when you painted it. And then you can turn it upside down and actually see how much overhang you have on there. Doesn't matter if you've got more, you can always trim it off later. So you'll also need some Q-tips as well. So I'll basically start from one corner, or the bottom of this part in particular, because you want to work the water out from underneath it. So if you can run either direction with the grain of the carbon fibre or against it, it doesn't really matter. So I'll hold it with my thumb in one position here, and then I'll just use the Q-tip, and I'll just keep working any water that's underneath the decal towards one end. Now I'll carefully take my finger off, and I'll hold the decal in the part where I've already spread the water out, and then I'll just continue to work in the other direction. Now this is really easy to do on a flat piece, a little bit more complex when you've got a shape like this. So I'll just basically move my finger up on the part a little bit, and then just keep working the decal down, and just keep working the water out. Now because it is a shape there, you can run the Q-tip the other way just to make sure that it is pressed into the part, and that's pretty much in the part. So I'm not going to attempt at this stage to get the decal to return around the edge. I just basically want to let that sit and dry out a little bit. Usually not too long, a couple of minutes. So I'll just put that to the side, and we'll do the other side of the side blade. Now this one, you'll note, actually has the hole or the depression in the top of the part for the fuel filler. I'll show you how I deal with that in a minute. We'll use the X-Acto knife for that, and we'll put some little score lines in there to relieve the pressure in the center of that. So again, decal comes off, hold the decal, and then just slide the backing out from underneath. Flip it over, just check your overhangs, make sure it's in the right position. If it's in the wrong position, you can always just get your Q-tip and just dob some more water on the top or under the edge, and it will actually float the decal again. And same as before, so I'll start at one end of the decal. I'll just remove all the water. I'll just check my overhang there, it has moved a little bit. You want to make sure you check that and move it before you get too far. Just makes it a lot easier to work. So I'll just continue to work all of the water out from under one end of the decal. You'll be able to see when it becomes nice and flat because you won't see any bubbling. Again, just reposition my finger, hold where I've already flattened it out and gotten rid of all the water bubbles, and then I'll just keep working the part down the transition into the shape. As I say, this shape is not too difficult. There are more complex ones and I'll show you that in a minute, but just keep working the bubbles out. Now you can see when I press into that depression how it wrinkles, so we don't want that. So what I'm going to do is, where this fuel filler is, I'm just going to do some little relief cuts, just basically like 2 stars on top of one another, and then just keep working the water out from under the decal until it's nice and flat and you can't see any. Don't worry about trying to press it into that shape at this stage. We just want to get the rest of the decal flat. And then when we apply the decal softener, that will sink into that little plastic molded depression. So that's as far as we want to go with that right now. So as you can see, it's basically flattened the decal out on the part. Now we'll come back to that first part. That's sat for a minute or two, and now we're going to apply the setting solution. So again, just use your paintbrush if you're using different brands. If you're using the Solver set like me, it has the brush on the lid, which makes it nice and easy. Now what this does, this will just soften the decal a little bit. It'll help it snuggle down into any little grooves or depressions or cracks. But I find that this stuff, just applying it onto the surface of the decal, will just help it adhere better. It'll help it adhere better to the part. So I'll just use a little paint tin there and I'll sit that on there. And then we'll do the same with this one as well. So just basically all over the part. There's a fair bit going on there, but it's not running off the part, so that gives you an idea. You don't want it running and dripping off the part, that's too much. And now with this one, we can actually, where this depression is, where we've done those little cuts in the decal, we can actually liberally apply quite a bit more. So I don't want to fill it up with decal setting solution, but I do put quite a bit in there, and I'll just let that sit. Oh, sorry, bumped the camera. Now we'll sit that onto the side as well. Now, what I want to do, I'll just let that sit for a little bit, and then I will use some Q-tips again, just to basically wipe off the excess of the part. But rather than do that with a dry Q-tip, I'll actually wet that Q-tip. I don't want it soaking wet, but I do want it damp. The reason I do this is because a dry cotton stick can actually drag the decal. In some cases, when you excessively soften the decal, the Q-tip can actually tear the carbon fibre decal when it's dry. So I always just moisten the tip, dip it in water, and then just dry it on a paper towel a little bit. And then I can run over the part and remove any more of that decal setting solution that's on the part. And having the wet Q-tip just helps it slide around on the decal and not drag on anything. And that's really all I want to do. I just want to take some of the excess off. As you can see, it's followed the contour very well. We've got the direction of the grain of the carbon fibre going 45 degrees to the part. And again, I'll just let this sit for a little bit, before we tackle doing the edges. So we'll put that aside, and again we'll do the same with this one. So we'll just basically wipe it over the decal, remove the rest of that decal setting solution that was on the surface. It just helps shrink the decal in places, and it helps conform to the shape. So that's basically it. Now you can see that the decal has already started to soften and fall into the shape of this where the fuel filler goes. So again, using the damp Q-tip, I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure, and I'm just going to follow around the edge. Now if you see any little creases like that, you just work those little creases out. And you can always apply more decal setting solution, and that will help the decal shrink a little bit more, and it will shrink those. So you can see there, most of that decal is dropped in around that edge of the fuel filler. But at the top, where there's not much plastic, it's just wrinkled a little bit. Now what I've just done there, I just wet my finger in the water, and you can use your finger as well, because you have a larger, flatter area with your finger, but your finger will also conform to the edge of the part. So I'll just basically use my finger, and I'll dab that on the top where those wrinkles were. Now I'll just use a dry Q-tip and wipe some of that excess liquid away. Now you can see that the decal has actually dropped into that round shape where the fuel filler goes, and using my finger got rid of some of those little or pretty much all of those little wrinkles that were in the top where there was not much body left. And that's basically it. So you just repeat those steps. If you still have some little wrinkles in the top, or the decal isn't quite sitting into a depression, just keep going through those steps. Just apply some more decal setting solution, let it sit for a little bit, and then just use that wet Q-tip just to basically push it into shape. And I use my fingers also, just moisten it, and use your finger because you can put that into the shape as well and help depress it. So that is a relatively, well, the first piece was a relatively easy piece. This one a little bit more difficult with the fuel cutout. Now what we want to do, we'll go back to the first piece, and as you can see there, the decal is still, the overhang is still past the edge of the part. So what we want to do now, we want to get this edge to wrap around the part. Now that just requires using more decal setting solution, but what I want to do is in the corners where this changes shape and this wants to fold on itself, I'm just going to do a little relief cut with my sharp X-Acto knife, and I'll do that in the corners as well, in other areas. And this part here, I've actually got about 3mm overhang. That's too much, so I'm just going to use my sharp knife, and I'm just going to trim that back a little bit just to take some off. Doesn't matter too much because most of it will wrap around, and sometimes if your knife is not really sharp like mine, that tended just to pull the decal a little bit, but you can just smooth that out with your finger. So now to make the edge stick, I'm just going to apply, I might actually just stick, when I painted these parts I actually just stuck them on an ice cream stick with some double-sided tape. I've just stuck that back on there so that I'm not handling the part. And basically I'm just going to liberally apply the decal setting solution around the edge of the part on that overhang of decal. And I'll let that sit, and that will soften the decal around those edges, and then it will actually start itself, its own process. It'll start to curl around the edge of the part. So I'll just let that part sit again, and we'll do the same to the other part. So you can see that's actually dried really well. I really like this Solvaset product, and it's worked itself into that hole really well. Again, I'll just stick my ice cream stick back on, use that as a handle, and then we'll do the same thing. So we'll just liberally apply the decal setting solution around the edge of the decal, around the edge of the part. I forgot to do a little cut in that one. That will work. And you just keep following these steps, like you just apply some setting solution, let it sit, use your wet Q-tip always just to try and work its way around the edge. If it doesn't quite seem like it wants to go yet, just apply more decal setting solution and just keep doing it step by step. So yeah, we need some more on there, and just let it sit. So what we might do to give that time, I'll get onto the other part and I'll show you that, and then we'll come back to this. So just let those sit on the side, and I'll show you how we tackle something like this. Now most people would look at that part and just say, how can you apply decal to that piece, or that part I should say, in one piece? Well, I'll show you. So again, we'll remove that bit of masking tape, the template, and we're going to do this in one piece. Some parts you just can't do in one piece, but I've done quite a few of these 458 custom models, and I've done every single one of these engine bays trims in carbon fibre decal, and all but one I got a little tear in it, but all the other ones no problem. So we'll put that into the water, let that soak for a little bit. Nearly there. As I say, with different brand decals, just follow their instructions. If it says 15 seconds, leave it in the water 15 seconds. Alright, so that's loose now. So basically going to start up at that front end and just pull the backing paper out. Now what we're going to do here, this is a little bit different, this method, because I'm going to do this in one piece. So just turn it over and make sure that it's sort of in the center, or you're covering where you want to cover. And because this has so many depressions, I'm not going to start trying to use a cotton tip to press it into shape. I'm actually going to use my finger. So I'll actually make sure my finger is nice and wet, because anything dry, your finger or a Q-tip, if it's really dry, it will just tear the decal. Now you can see how much that has conformed to that part of the shape already. Now that's just using my finger and a little bit of pressure, not too much. As you can see, you put too much pressure, the decal will just lift off because it's still got a lot of water underneath it. Just check your overhangs that you've got enough either side. And then again, with the damp Q-tip, I'm just going to start from, this has got a corner here, so I'm going to start with a corner and try and push water out. Then we'll go over all those little louvers and then try and feel the shape underneath the Q-tip of just that main section, because if I start trying to bend this over, we haven't softened the decal yet, and this part of the decal hasn't grabbed to the part. So what we want to do is we want to get this part sticking first. Now again, I'm going to use my finger and I'm going to use a little bit of pressure to push it into those louvers. Then I'll use the Q-tip, I'll get rid of that excess water, even use a dry one, that'll soak it up better. So you can see already on that part, we've got that vertical wall and the main section over the louvers. That's pretty much to shape. There's still some voids underneath it, and there's probably some water underneath it as well. But that's the tricky part. So anything that's really three-dimensional like these louvers, you want to start with that section first because it's easier to get the wrinkles out of the flat areas. Now we're going to apply liberally, not dripping off, but quite a lot. We're going to apply more setting solution. So in this case, the solver set. I'm going to run it all the way down to the end. So basically that whole plane has plenty of solver set on it. Now what I do with this is just, again, it's just apply, let it sit, use the damp Q-tip just to keep gently pushing it into shape once it starts softening the decal. And to do a piece like this, it's just a matter of repeating over and over again. Usually a piece like this will take me about 20-25 minutes to get this all sitting right in this section. So with something with all these louver shapes like this, I'll let this sit for at least 5 minutes before I even try and touch it, and I'll sit it and lean it up against something so that it's at the angle that I want it to. So yeah, so we'll let that sit for a while, and we'll come back to the edges on these side blades. So that's sat there for quite a while. I'm basically using the Q-tip, just a little bit of pressure downwards, but trying to push it on the edge of the part as well. Just helps to massage the decal into a vertical direction to go down the end of the part. You can also use your finger as well. Sometimes that works better than a Q-tip. So you just want to leave a little bit of time from when you did the face to when you do the edges, so that if you start trying to squish it around the edge, it doesn't move the face. So you can see there that my finger is actually working better than the Q-tip because I've got a larger, flatter area, and I can actually roll my finger around the part. And that actually helps. There's a couple of areas where it's not quite staying down, which just means we'll need another application of the decal setting solution, but we're well on the way there. So if you can see that, it is folding around, but it's still not quite flat or returned around the other side. It does when my finger is on there, but you'll see it sort of starts to lift up. So what we'll do, we'll just add another layer of solver set around the outside and just let that, it will help shrink that down. And if you're doing multiple parts, you don't have to stop, you can just keep going on to the next part. So again, I'm going to use my finger because it's working a bit better today on these parts. And your finger's a bit more flexible on the tip of your finger than a Q-tip, so you can go around those curved edges. Oh. That's why it helps to have a ice cream stick or an in-situ handle to help you handle the part sometimes. Makes it a little bit easier. And there we have it. So we'll dry off some excess there. Just to show you, so there you can see there that that one is stuck a lot better around the edges, probably because it's sat a little bit longer with the solver set. You can see on the back side there, you can see the carbon fibre is wrapped right around the edge. The decal setting solution does that, so once you get that bent around the edge, that will shrink to the edge shape. Now you can also put some on the back edge as well, just a little bit, just to soften that. And then I'm actually going to go one more time around there, just so that because this does help it shrink and snuggle. So once it's around there, we'll do another little application around the edge, let that sit, and then I'll come back again one more time and use my finger and stick it around the edge. Now this doesn't always work this way. Most of the time it does, but it'll vary on what parts you're trying to work on. So just take your time with it. If there's little areas that aren't sticking down, don't force it too much. Just keep applying more decal setting solution and coming back to it and trying to stick it down. Some parts will take a lot more than others. It's just trial and error. I never thought I could do decals on a really complex shape even 2 years ago, and I just kept pushing the boundaries and seeing what was possible and what wasn't. And it's pretty amazing what you can get done. Again, it depends on the quality of the decals. I can only speak for these decal sheets that I use from Decal. And there you have it. So that is going to be, it's got a couple of little edges there. Again, I'm just going to keep applying decal solution until it's completely wrapped around the edge, and then I'm happy with it. And then I'll let the parts dry for a day or two, and then I'll clear coat them in lacquer. I'll talk about that later. So as I say, just repeat the process until you start getting the desired effect. Now we'll come back to this engine bay part. So that's had a bit of time now to really soften that decal up. And I'll see if you can see that. You can actually see it's really starting to conform to those louvers now that the decal is a lot softer. And that's followed that shape better as well because it's soft. So that's through there. So that's pretty close. But what I'm going to do again, I'm going to wet my finger, and now I'm going to put a lot of pressure on there and really squish that decal down into those louvers. Okay, so use the cotton stick again, get rid of some of that excess water from my fingers. Now you can keep coming back with this method, and you keep applying some more Solvaset. Just the more Solvaset or decal solution that you put on things like louvers here, and the more you keep working that area, because they're little ridged tops, there is a chance that you can tear the decal. So just be careful when you are doing sections like that with the louvers. But as you can see, it works pretty good. It's a pretty good method, because obviously your finger's a lot more flexible, your skin, and when you use a bit of pressure, it sticks to the inside parts of the part and over the top of the louvers. So that way there, we don't see the back of this part here, so I'm just going to do some cuts just to relieve the pressure. And I'll come back with that Q-tip and just make sure that's stuck down. So what we'll do, I'll use the finger again, and I'm just going to wrap it around that bottom edge, because that will in effect hold the part, or hold the decal where we've already applied the setting solution, and it'll help it not slide upwards. So you can see there, I've just crudely wrapped it around that bottom edge, which basically holds what we've just laid in place. A couple more areas there. You can always see where the water is underneath it because it's not sitting quite flat. And that's basically it. Now, as we get to this top section, this has got actually a few more depressions in it. So now we're going to work the top section with the Solvaset. So we'll put that on there. Again, I'm going to use my finger and see what sort of preliminary shape I can get this into. Again, I don't want to try and rush the process, but that's getting it into shape. Just use my Q-tip. Just start from the bottom section that you've already done. Make sure you're not pulling any of the decal out of that part of the shape. Just push that back in there. And then just work it along into the shapes. Now it's always handy to know what you're working with on the other side. So we're nearly near the edge of this. So what I'll do, I'm just going to do some relief cuts in the excess. Because that will help. Where there's no plastic tabs on here, I'll know how close I am to the edge. So we're right near the edge now already. And just work that into place. Now that needs to become a lot softer than it is, so again I'm just going to liberally apply the Solvaset on this top section. It's quite wet, as you can see, there's quite a bit in there. Just going to add a little bit more to the back there and just work that a little bit more before I proceed with the top section. But you can see already that I'm really starting to get that into the shape where it's got to go. I'll just try and keep it all a bit moist. You see any little areas that are lifting, the Q-tip has actually now got quite a bit of Solvaset in it as well as water. So just keep dabbing it. Don't force it. Just dab it and you'll see that it's following the part. So again, you've just got to let that sit, let the Solvaset do its job, let it soften the decal to where you can actually move it around into all the little cracks and crevices. And if it's not quite where it is, it needs some more time and some more decal setting solution. So as I say, we're doing multiple parts, so we can just keep rotating and go back to the other parts. And this one's just about done. I think that last little application of decal setting solution was what we needed. We use a clean Q-tip now. Just basically wipe it, make sure there's nothing on the top. And there we have a side blade. So it's gone around the edge easily now after 3 applications. A couple little furry spots, but that's nothing to worry about. And as you can see, it's nice and flat. Just make sure that before you apply the decal that you don't have any little bits of dirt or dust in the paint that has a little bump, because the decal is very thin. It will just follow and go straight over that bump. So just make sure the part's nice and smooth. So that's that one done. The other side blade for the other side, same again. We'll just go around with the finger, just roll it around the edge of the part. Just helps that decal stick. And that's basically it. We'll just dry that part off. And again, if there's any little areas that you see where it's got a little wrinkle in it, just go back with the decal setting solution and just keep working that area. So that is the 2 side blades done. One is a basic one with a little bit of a curvature in it. That's just as easy to do as a flat part, to be honest. Don't be intimidated by that. And then the other part, I've showed you how to make the relief cuts in there and to press it into a shape. So that's those 2 parts. Now I'll let those dry for 2 days, as I say, 1 day or 2 days, depends on how hot the weather is. And then you can clear coat them. Now I usually, well, most of the time I paint all my models in automotive paint, and I use an automotive clear coat. You can use a Tamiya clear coat in a can. Just bear in mind that to get them super glossy and get a nice thick coat of clear, you'll probably have to do about 15 to 20 coats because the lacquer in those cans is super thin, so that it atomizes out of a spray nozzle. Zero Paints is one manufacturer I know that does do a 2-pack clear. That's what I would recommend to clear coat these carbon parts rather than out of a spray can. But play around with it and see. So that's basically how you carbon fibre a flat piece and a flat piece with a little indentation. So now we'll come back to this engine part. So that has softened now, and we can just basically use that Q-tip to work it into the grooves. Now, as I say, this Ferrari 458 engine trim surround has definitely got some awkward shapes going on, but we can make it work. Again, it's just sometimes these parts take a long time to get carbon fibre, but the results are definitely worth it at the end of the day. So just play around with the simple pieces first, and then you'll be able to graduate up to more complex parts when you get used to how the decal, how much room you've got to play with as far as the flexibility of the decal. So again, I'm just going to, I'll finish this one off. You get the idea now of the process of it. Just squish it into the shape, apply more setting solution, wait, apply some more pressure to get it into place, more decal setting solution. It's just, you've just got to repeat over and over again. So I'm going to finish this piece off and then I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so I spent probably another 10 minutes on this part just to get it into all these depressions in the top. That's pretty much there. I'll probably just let this dry out a little bit more, and then I'll go and just get any of those further little wrinkles out. It does take quite a bit of work to make one single piece of carbon fibre follow that shape. As I say, you just need to go over it just again and again. Just keep applying decal setting solution. It's not perfectly contoured around those louvers, but I can just keep adding more decal setting solution. But being that it's in an engine bay, and I'll do 2 to 3 coats of clear coat on this, and it tends to fill in the gaps, and you end up just with a super glossy finish anyway. So I'll clear these tomorrow, probably, maybe the next day. I've got another model car body to paint, so when I'm doing the clear coat on that body, I will clear these parts, and then I'll finish this video off. I'll show you how the parts look once they're cleared, and that gives you an idea on how to apply this carbon fibre decal to basic flat parts like that, and something way more complex. So I'll join you next when I've clear coated these parts. Okay, so it's the next day, and I had a chance to clear coat these parts this morning. So these have been drying for the last 3 or 4 hours. It's got a pretty good shine on it. I'm not quite happy with the gloss level on this. It's still winter time here in Australia, so I'm going to let these fully dry for another day, and then I'm just going to give them a rub down and give them a final clear coat. Now I have to do that, not sure whether you can see, but I got a little piece of dust in this one, and this is the other side as well, and I also got a little bit of dust just next to the B there. So as I say, I'll let these dry. These are clear coated in automotive 2-pack clear. You can use an acrylic like a spray can, like a Tamiya. It's just going to take a lot more coats to get the same thickness as you get out of automotive clear. So yeah, that's clear coated, and obviously I've applied these LB decals on top of the carbon decal before I clear coated these parts. So that's the side blades I showed you how to do previously, and this is the rear diffuser as well. It's still a bit tacky, I don't want to handle it, so I've still got it in a bulldog clip here. But this was basically 5 pieces of carbon, so the 2 pieces on the side, the center piece, and then I did the little side strips which run over the top as well. So again, I'm going to let this piece dry for another day, and then I'll give it a rub down and give it a final clear coat. And I just wanted to show you the 458 Ferrari engine surround, which was the more complex application of carbon to get over all these little louver panels. As you can see, I've applied, I usually apply the first coat as a dust coat, what we call a dust coat, which is just a very light tack coat, and then you can put a full wet coat on top of that, and then another full wet coat on top of that. So that's had 3 coats of clear. It's not perfect, I didn't get the decal right into that little groove there, but it was just for the video, just to show you how to basically apply it, and just to follow the steps over and over again. So as you can see, compared to the standard plastic side, it looks a hell of a lot better, and it looks a lot more realistic as well. So yeah, have a play around with these carbon fiber decals and the clear coating, and turn some of these ordinary parts into extraordinary parts. So that's going to be it for today's video on how to carbon fiber decal parts, from basic parts to more complex parts. Hopefully that's been a informative tutorial for you to show you how I do it. Look, there's other people that may do it different ways. This is just the way that I do it, so hopefully it's helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, just leave them in the comments section below. I'll be sure to answer them if I can. And stay tuned for another helpful tutorial coming soon. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Don't forget to smash that like button. Feel free to share this video also. And thanks for watching this how-to tutorial. So until the next video, thanks for watching Rob's Model Cars.